My mother's behavior, was erratic. It was very unsteady, and she was in and out of hospitals throughout her life, throughout my life. So it wasn't until sitting with my therapist where she said, you grew up, in a war zone. I'm like, well, no, my parents came from Belarus and Poland. Like they came after World War II. Like that was a war zone. And they're like, well, she said, well, there's different types of instability. And I guess I underplayed what I was going through because I knew what my parents went through. So through therapy, and I write about this in the book, I talk a lot about EMDR, which is eye movement reprocessing and then desensitization. So it's a technique you can use. Some people do it with light, some people do it with sound or with touch, and it's kind of a way of resetting your brain. It is an exorcism of childhood trauma. It's really intense, and for me, as someone who has a background as an actor, and it was a way of like reliving. You go through different moments, and the moments themselves might not be particularly traumatic, but sometimes things that we experience as children, when you're an adult, you get stuck back into that moment. Like you emotionally react like you were as a child, or you feel that feeling of not being safe or abandonment. So it's a way of, in a way, like reconnecting with that childhood self to say like, hey, I'm okay, like I made it, and you're okay, like you made it. And so EMDR for me was so transformative, and things that I used to really like have huge emotional responses to, now it's more like a cognitive, like, oh yeah, that happened and I don't like that, or maybe I don't need to stay in that situation. So it's incredibly calming and helpful, and it helps with anxiety because I grew up always worrying something's going to happen, because something always was happening, and it was for real. Like it was legitimate worry. And I think when that's like your normal set, like something's going to go wrong. So I had a big realization after my mother passed. I was in a yoga class, and I just remember exhaling and thinking, I don't have to worry anymore. And I didn't know what that was like, not to worry.
Right. I apologize. You did say it was your therapist, and I said you said,
Oh no, that's okay.
but
That's okay.
but that is correct, your therapist. And I think it's different when somebody like a therapist or a psychologist tells you it was like living in a war zone, because that is some sort of validation as well for the constant, never-ending trauma. Because what happens in a household where there is this severe mental illness is that every day is different. You don't know what to expect. It's not like, oh, your mum may have run out across the street and thrown things at moving cars, and the same thing is going to happen the next day, so you're prepared for it. You're never prepared, because every day it's something different. And that's why it really jumped out at me, and I thought, yes, I think I can relate to that as well. And I think that part of all of doing these interviews is also getting a bit of validation for what we lived through as a child, because you feel so isolated and you feel that you're the only one going through it. And like you, my brother and I didn't talk about it to anybody.